Welcome to the 2-color pyramid clutch crochet along project. This clutch does not need too much yarns to work with, and is a great project to use up your leftover yarns. You will need 2 different color yarns of your choice. Prefer to be 2 contrasting colors. This project is intermediate beginner level. As we make this simple and beautiful pyramid clutch, we will learn how to make knit stitches, also called waistcoat stitches, how to make invisible join at the end of each round, how to carry the yarn, how to make joggerless join with color change, how to make a tidy finish, and how to attach the zipper onto the clutch. The material you need for this project are 2 different color yarns with the same yarn weight, 1 dark color and 1 light color. Each yarn requires less than 30 feet to work with. I prefer to use a hook size smaller than the yarn label recommended because I don't want the clutch to have any holes to show through. The final size of this pyramid clutch is about 5 inches big, so I will need a 5 inches zipper to zip it up. I also need a darning needle, a few stitch markers, and a pair of scissors. Let's get started. To begin, we will make a slip knot. Wrap the yarn around the fingers. Pull the yarn up from under and tighten the loop. Insert the crochet hook through the loop and make 16 chain stitches. 1, 2, 3, 14, 15, and 16. Let's look at this foundation chain stitches. Each chain stitch has back loop and front loop. When slightly rotate the foundation chain, we will see each stitch also has a back bump. We are going to use each of the back bump to make foundation stitches. Now, find the back bump of the second chain stitch from the hook. And make 1 single crochet stitch. Place 1 stitch marker at this stitch. This will make your life a lot easier later. Continue to make 1 single crochet stitch at each of the back bump from the foundation chain stitches. Place 1 stitch marker at the last single crochet stitch. Now let's look at this row. You can see both front loop and back loop at each single stitch from the top and from the bottom view. Later, we will crochet around this foundation row. Having these identical loops from the both sides, we can easily make equal tension stitches. As we can see, each pair of the front loop and the back loop forms a V shape. This can be seen from both top and bottom views of each stitch. From the top view, we see that we have already placed 2 different color stitch markers at the first and at the last single stitches of the foundation row. 1 blue, 1 white. Now, we are going to place another set of stitch markers with the corresponding color at the first and at the last single stitches from the bottom view. Both blue stitch markers are at the first single stitch of the foundation row. Both Y stitch markers are at the last single stitch of the foundation row. There are 13 stitches between two different color stitch markers. Later on, we will make 5 stitches between the two blue stitch markers, and we will also make 5 stitches between the two white stitch markers. Instead of turning the foundation row around, we are going to continue crochet around the foundation stitches for the next round. Chain 1 to raise the height. Make 3 single crochet stitches at the same back bump where the last stitch of the foundation row was made. Turn the strip slightly clockwise. Use the both loops and make 1 single crochet stitch at each of the next 13 stitches. As we are making the stitches, don't forget to carry the short end of the yarn. This way we don't have to weave in the yarn at the end of the project. Make 2 single crochet stitches at the next stitch. The next free loop we see is the first chain stitch from the foundation chains. It can be a bit hard to find it. Make 1 single crochet stitch at this free loop. Make 2 single crochet stitches at the next stitch, which is the first single crochet stitch from the foundation row. Continue to make 1 single crochet stitch at each of the next 13 stitches. Now we reach the last stitch from the foundation row. Remember, there is the chain stitch between the last stitch from the foundation row and the first stitch at the beginning of this round. Before making any further stitches, place 1 stitch marker at the first single stitch of this round. Then make 2 single crochet stitches at the last stitch from the foundation row. Skip this chain stitch and make 1 invisible slip stitch at the first single crochet stitch of this round to close the round. Normally, we just insert the hook through both loops from the front to the back and make 1 slip stitch. But now we're going to let loose with the stitch we just made. Insert the hook from the back to the front. Pull the last loop from the front to the back. Then tighten the loop. Now we complete an invisible slip stitch. At this time, this strip is about 4.5 inches long. From this point on, all stitches are made with crochet knit stitch, also called waistcoat stitch. As we know, In order to make one single crochet stitch at the next round, we just insert the hook under both front and back loops of the stitch from the previous round. But the knit stitch is made in a different way. We can see from the front view, each single crochet stitch appears a V shape. To make the knit stitch, find the V shape, find the center of the V. We are going to insert the hook through the center point. At this round, we continue to use the dark color yarn, chain 1 to raise the height. Starting from the first stitch, find the V shape, find the center of the V. Insert the hook through the center point. Yarn over, pull a long loop out through the center point. Yarn over and draw the yarn through the 2 loops from the hook to complete the stitch. Place 1 stitch marker and mark the stitch as the first stitch. Make 1 knit stitch at each stitch. Make sure to pull a long loop out through the center of the V. This will make next round much easier to crochet. After complete the last knit stitch, skip the beginning chain stitch, using the invisible joint at the first knit stitch of this round to close the round. After 2 rounds of dark color yarn, time to change to the light color yarn. After the invisible join from the previous round, simply pull the light color yarn through the dark color yarn loop, then tighten the dark color yarn. For this project, we don't need to make 1 chain stitch at the beginning of each color changing round. Starting from the first stitch, make 1 knit stitch at each stitch, carrying both dark color and light color yarns at the first stitch. Then carry the short portion of the light color yarn through the rest of the stitch making. Occasionally, check if there is any accidental mistake from making the knit stitches. After making the last knit stitch, if you notice there is a slack dark color yarn and a big gap before the next stitch, simply pull the dark color yarn tight to decrease the gap. Then use the invisible joint at the first knit stitch of this round to close the round. Now you can see the beautiful jogless join. Round 4. With the same light color yarn, chain 1 to raise the height. Make 1 knit stitch and carry the dark color yarn at the first stitch from this round. Place 1 stitch marker at this stitch for easy identification if needed. Continue to make 1 knit stitch at each stitch. Skip the chain stitch. Use the invisible join at the first knit stitch of this round to close the round. After 2 rounds of the light color yarn, time to change to the dark color yarn. After the invisible join from the previous round, simply pull the dark color yarn through the light color yarn loop, then tighten the light color yarn. Again, for this project, we don't need to make 1 chain stitch at the beginning of each color changing round. Starting from the first stitch, make 1 knit stitch at each stitch, carrying the light color yarn at the first stitch. After making the last knit stitch, if you notice there is a slack light color yarn and a big gap before the next stitch, simply pull the light color yarn tight to decrease the gap. Then use the invisible join at the first knit stitch of this round to close the round. Now you can see the beautiful juggler's join. Round 6. With the same dark color yarn, chain 1 to raise the height. Starting from the first stitch, make 1 knit stitch. Carry the light color yarn at the first stitch. Place 1 stitch marker at this stitch for easy identification if needed. Continue to make 1 knit stitch at each stitch. Skip the chain stitch. Use the invisible join at the first knit stitch of this round to close the round. With carrying the contrasting color yarn upwards, you can get the neat result even this happens at the wrong side of the work. And at this time, you can clearly see the nice juggler's stripe transition. As you can see, round 3 and 4 are light color rounds, and round 5 and 6 are dark color rounds. These 4 rounds count as one repeat. For this project, we will repeat round 3 to 6 3 more times, then repeat round 3 to 5 one more time. Go ahead to pause the video and continue for 3 more pattern repeat of round 3 to 6 and 1 more repeat of round 3 to 4 with light color yarn. And I'll be back after that. Now we are at the last round of this project. We do not need to use more light color yarn. We can cut it off and weave it in as we continue to crochet with the dark color yarn. After the invisible joint from the previous round, simply pull the dark color yarn through the light color yarn loop, then tighten the light color yarn. Again, for this project, we don't need to make one chain stitch at the beginning of each color changing round. Starting from the first stitch, make 1 knit stitch at each stitch, carrying the light color yarn through the rest of the stitch making. Usually, when we are making the knit stitch, we need to pull the yarn up high. This is because we tend to make the knit stitch tight. Consequently, at the next round of knit stitch making, we will have hard time to insert the crochet hook into the center of the V. However, because this is the last round, we won't have this kind of problem, so we really don't need to pull the yarn high up. Also, the entire round appears a bit flatter than the previous rounds. As the previous rounds, we finish each round using invisible joint method. Now we can also just use the regular slip stitch at the first knit stitch of this round to close this last round. After completed the last stitch from any crochet project, we usually make 1 more chain stitch as a knot before cutting the yarn off. However, this will leave a bump look at the last stitch. To overcome this appearance, don't make the last chain stitch. Instead, pull the yarn up after making the last stitch. Cut the yarn. Thread the yarn through the darning needle. Now, look at the top of each stitch. The front loop and the back loop of each stitch form a V shape. Insert the darning needle under the V of the next stitch, from the back to the front. Then insert the needle tip through the center of the V of the previous stitch toward to the wrong side. Adjust the tension. Now, this stitch is virtually invisible. Next, hide the yarn at the wrong side. We have completed the crochet part. A well done pouch. Now we're ready to attach the zipper on it. The next steps is to make the pouch into the pyramid shape. Remember to use the zipper with appropriate length. Now let's bring this pouch into the shape of a pyramid. To form a pyramid shape, first flatten the pouch and use the stitch markers to mark two side ends of the pouch. Open the pouch, bring two side ends together with two stitch markers touch each other's. Flatten the top edge of the pouch to find the two new side ends. Mark these two new side ends with two new stitch markers. We then remove the previous two stitch markers. A pyramid shape is formed, and we are ready to attach the zipper. Now, place the zipper on the pouch at the correct spot. Use the pins to secure and stabilize the zipper's position. Inline the top of the zipper tape at one side of the pouch. Use the sewing thread with the matching color. Sew alongside the zipper teeth. You can use any preferred sewing method, but be consistent. Remember to pull out the pin so you won't accidentally sew cross over it. In the process of sewing, occasionally slide the zipper slider up and down to make sure the slider is not stuck and no yarn is caught. Pay attention to the stitch tension of each stitch. Don't forget to secure the zipper ends. Repeat the same process at the other side of the pouch. Here you have the beautiful two-color stripes pyramid clutch. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. Thanks for watching.